it up for your final storyteller tonight, Amory Jane.
2016 was a terrible year. I know, it's cliche at this point, right? It wasn't just bad globally and politically, though. For me personally, it was a very rough year. And the roughness started within the first few seconds of 2016. I was on stage performing at a New Year's show, as I had done for the past 6 years. And I was there with my husband. He was in the same band as me. And he was doing his guitar solo, and it was getting close to midnight. And every year for the past 6 years, we always found each other on midnight. And we had the midnight kiss. It was a tradition, no matter what was going on. We were polyamorous, and sometimes we had partners on stage with us. A lot of times they were in the audience, but no matter what, we found each other for that kiss. And I had no reason to believe that this year would be any different. So as the countdown happened, I walked across the stage, and I waited behind him, and the countdown was going. 4, 3, 2, 1. But there was no kiss for me. And I opened my eyes, and my husband was at the end of the stage, bending over into the audience and kissing his girlfriend. That was supposed to be my kiss. And this was not just like a little peck, and then he looked for me. He didn't even look across the stage to see where I was. This was a full-blown makeout sesh. And I was watching it and waiting my turn, and my turn never came. And then I realized there was like 500 people staring at me while I was on a stage, shocked. I went backstage and I had a panic attack. And he never came to check on me. And I don't know if it's normal to have a moment in your life where you realize your marriage is over, but that was my moment. And I didn't know what to do with myself because we had been together for 10 years. He was my family. I wanted to be the mother of his children. But he didn't love me anymore. And pretty soon after that, we separated. What do you do at that point? 10 years with one person when you expected to have at least another 10 more. I mean, at that point, I had nothing else to do but then to get real weird with it. So, I joined a femme coven sex party. As you do. I also decided to take out my modest savings and buy a 21-foot RV. It was a used RV. She was about as old as I was, born in the 80s. And I named her St. Edna the Sex Ed Mobile. She's my sex mobile because I'm a sex educator, and the plan was to take her around traveling, teach my workshops, do my podcast. It was going to be a whole thing, like a poor person's version of Eat, Pray, Love. Because I wasn't going to go divorce and go to a Tuscan village and find love. I couldn't afford that. I was going to get a shitty RV and travel the country teaching Southerners and Midwesterners about sex. Right? Yeah. So that was the plan. But Edna needed a little work because, as I mentioned, she's from the 80s, so she's a little outdated. So I parked her in my best friend's driveway and started fixing her up, and I lived in my best friend's driveway for a few months. My little tiny house on wheels. It's just me and Edna, the sex ed mobile. And of course, my femme sex coven. And my going away party, the night before I left, we decided with this coven that we were going to have a fisting night. Now, I had never been fisted. I'm a sex educator. I've learned about fisting. I watched many queer porn scenes that featured fisting, but I had not experienced fisting on a giving or a receiving end at that point. And a few other people were in the same group as me, so we decided, let's have a fisting night. Let's get a group of femmes together, teach each other skills, have some fun, a lot of finger banging, we'll have good snacks. So we did just that. And it was a really nice night. And then it got to a point where one of my friends, she was my intern, actually, she said, AJ, are you ready to be fisted? And I was like, okay, sure, let's go for it. What else do I have going on? My life's a mess, right? Fist me. So I spread my legs open and I laid. There were babes behind me holding me. It was really lovely. Stroking me, petting my hair, comforting me, warming me up. The exact perfect situation to be fisted. But as my intern got her hands inside of me, well, fingers. She got about 2 in, and the 3rd finger went in, and my body just shut down. It was like, no fisting for you. No fisting for me. The whole purpose of this going away party was to send me away freshly fisted into the world. And my body couldn't do it. Of course it couldn't, because nothing had gone right for me that year. My body couldn't even take a small intern's hands. But it was okay. I had this trip to look forward to. Edna was ready. So I hopped in my sex ed mobile and I hit the road. I traveled through the Cascades. I went through deserts and swamps, mountains and valleys and hills. And then I got to Texas. And it was in Denton, Texas, that St. Edna, Denton. It was in Denton, Texas, that St. Edna, the sex ed mobile, started acting a little ill. She wasn't running on all cylinders. So I took her into an auto care place, and they said, we have to order parts. RVs are specialized. It'll be a couple of days. Ooh, I didn't really have time in my schedule for that, but what could I do? Edna was my baby girl. So I gave Edna over, and I stayed in Denton, Texas. But I was bored after like 3 hours. So I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to join Tinder. I'd never been on Tinder before, but I heard it was the fastest way to get laid. And I was in the mood. So I joined Tinder in Texas. And I wanted to increase my odds, so I opened up my options to everyone, all genders. There were not a lot of options coming in from Denton, Texas. It was a lot of dudes trying to send me messages about going out shooting. I was like, left swipe. Left is the one that you don't like, by the way, in case you didn't know that. So I was swiping left on everyone, being picky. No. At this point, I was messed up. I didn't want to just hook up with anyone. It had to be someone who I had some sort of natural rapport with. And finally, I got this message. It was from a guy. I couldn't tell what he really looked like. It was a side profile. He was wearing a hat, but I could tell he had a big nose. It was a really delicious-looking nose, though. So I was like, all right, swipe right. I like your nose. Talk to me. And he said, hey, too bad you're in Denton, Texas. I'm in Portland, Oregon. Maybe we could meet in Salt Lake City for a drink. And I was like, all right, that's obviously a joke because Salt Lake City is a dry county. I like your sense of humor. I will allow this. And in fact, I'm from Portland. And he's like, oh, well, maybe when you get back, we could go for a date. I didn't like Tinder, so I closed down the app, but I got his number, and we started texting. And we were texting from the road, so when I was at rest stops or in a Denny's 24-hour parking lot sleeping so I wouldn't have to pay for a hotel, I would text him. When I was in the evangelical Christian RV park on accident, tripping on mushrooms, I texted him. And my tour was going pretty well. I was teaching a lot of classes. They were going great. I was able to put on that big sex educator smile and look so composed and talk to everybody about G-spot orgasms and squirting and prostates. And then I would go back to St. Edna, the sex ed mobile, and feel lonely. But I kept moving forward. And by the time I got to California, I was getting pretty excited to eventually go home to Portland. This was going to be a new life for me. I was going to really get Edna ready. Or maybe I could rent out an apartment and have Edna as my Airbnb. It was a perfect Portland plan. You know the housing prices, right? So I had this plan. I was going to go to this conference in California, then take 2 days to get back to Portland, and when I got there, I was going to go on a date with this Tinder guy. I picked up a friend at the conference who was going to road trip up with me, and our plan was to go from Sacramento to Ashland, spend the night in Ashland, Ashland to Portland. But when we got to Ashland, she was like, just do it. Let's go all the way to Portland. Let's push it. It's a 12-hour drive, but we can do this. 12 hours in one day. And I was like, all right, fine, let's do it. But I think we pushed Edna too hard. Because as we were passing Beaverton and seeing the signs to Portland, Oregon, there was this loud screeching noise. Poor Edna, it was her death rattle. And I pulled off to the side of the road and she just shut down. And I tried everything I could to get her to work, but St. Edna was dead. Of course she was, because it was 2016, the year of complete shit. Edna was not just my RV or my tiny house on wheels. She was my noble steed. But I had to call AAA. And AAA said, well, it's an RV. It's going to take a while to find something to tow that. So you hang tight. So that date that I had set, I had texted the guy when I was leaving Ashland, being like, I'm going to be back tonight. We're going to go on a date. But I had texted him and said, never mind about that date. My RV is dead, and I'm homeless now. So I'll see you another time. And he said, hey, lady, I think exactly what you need right now is a free meal and a drink. I don't care how late it is. Join me when you're done. So AAA dropped me off at the radio room for my date. And I got there at midnight. And I walked in. And it was like a Tuesday night. There was hardly anybody in there. So even though I didn't know what Tinder guy looked like from his profile picture, I knew exactly who he was when I walked in the door. He was adorable and short and not intimidating. And he gave me a really big hug. And I sat down and we started having a conversation. And I looked gross, y'all. I had been traveling for 12 hours. I didn't have access to a shower. I was like wearing a hoodie and just greasy. But he looked at me like I was attractive, which was cool. And we ended up talking and flirting and staying at the radio room until they closed. And they kicked us out at like 2:30. And I said, so I'm homeless. Can I come over? And he said, yeah, we have an extra bedroom in my house, actually, and it's right up the street. Ooh, convenient. But I would not be staying in the extra bedroom that night. So we got to his house, and we talked a little more, and we were in the kitchen. He was making me tea. And I hadn't had anybody take care of me for a while. And it was a big turn on, so I pushed him up against the oven. Not into the oven. I pushed him up against the oven, and I said, may I kiss you? And he said, yes, please. Yes, please. I love yes, please. So we smooched, and it was a real good smooch. And I said, take me to your room. So he took me upstairs and opened the door to what I assumed was going to be his bedroom. But when we walked in, there was no bed. It's just a bunch of musical equipment. And I was like, another musician? Why do I always have a type? But then he said, I know it seems confusing. There's no bed in here. This is my bedroom. It's also my studio, but here's my bed. And he opened up a closet door. And there's a little bed in the closet. And I thought it was so charming. It reminded me of something from childhood. I used to sleep in the closet. Read into that however you want. It was comforting in the closet, but it was very dark. But I had a string of lights that I had taken down from Edna before she got towed. So I hung up my string of lights in his bedroom closet and crawled into his bed, into his flannel sheets, and invited him to sit next to me. And we started making out some more. And the makeouts turned into groping. And the groping turned into nudity. And he took off my pants. I don't wear pants. Who thinks I wear pants? No one's ever seen me in pants. They were definitely leggings. Pants are stupid. They have zippers and buttons. I don't want to deal with that. He took off my leggings. And we had the safer sex talk, because I'm a sex educator. I knew it was important. And once that all checked out, he started going down on me. It was good. It was really good. It was too good. I couldn't feel this good with someone. I didn't want to feel this good with someone. I was so fucked up at this point in my life. My brain was a mess. My heart was a mess. I was destroyed. I was heartbroken. I could not let anyone see that. He didn't care. He kept his tongue on my clit until I came all over his face. It was very good. But it didn't stop there. He put a couple of fingers inside me. And I blurted out, "Have you ever fisted anyone?" Holy shit. This might be my chance. This dude's kind of little. I said, "Let me see your hands." And so he was like, "Here you go." And I took his hands in my hands, and they were gloriously small. It was like, and he said, "You know, I have actually fisted someone. My ex-girlfriend was a queer woman, and she wanted me to be really good at lesbian sex." So I have a lot of experience with fisting. And I was like, get that tiny hand inside of me. So he slowly inserted 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers. He was still going down on me to keep me warmed up. He was kissing my thighs. He was breathing deeply and encouraging me to breathe deeply. And then he put in the final finger, and I tried to shut down. My body tried. It was like, oh wait, we remember this. This is the part where we shut down. We don't let anybody get this close. Once you get your hand inside somebody, you can feel their soul. But he said, may I? Please? Please, of course. So he put his final finger inside of me. And miraculously, his entire hand went in. Slowly, gently, perfectly. I could feel my blood pumping through my body, and I know he could too, because he was in the center of me. And I was freaked the fuck out, because he was so close to me, but I did it. And he used his other hand to work my clit, and I came with his hand inside of me. And I exploded and released everything I had held onto that whole year. And you know what? It was okay. I survived. I opened myself up. I allowed myself to feel connected. I fucking did it. Thank you.